If you ask Manchester United fans about problem areas in their team, as well as central midfield, you'd very often hear fullbacks. Now, obviously, on the right-hand side, Aaron Wan-Bissaka was a very expensive acquisition and in a lot of ways is a fantastic player. It's more of an issue perhaps on the left, but do Manchester United really have a problem with their fullbacks? And if they do, what can they do about it? If we look at Man United's favoured 4-2-3-1 formation, we can see the sorts of things that are required of fullbacks in this system. The front three, with Rashford and Greenwood, tend to tuck inside, and they get quite narrow here, and that's why fullbacks, so we've got Wan-Bissaka moving here on the right-hand side, and we've got Shaw moving here on the left, are expected to provide a degree of width. With players that are playing on their wrong side, which you would tend to see with inverted wingers, it's really important that the fullbacks provide a lot of width, and they're expected to get forwards into crossing positions or possibly to make decoy runs that draw an opposition defender across and create space for those inverted wingers to cut inside. So if we see Wan-Bissaka moving up here, this number 5, maybe he's moving across to help double up. That creates a bit of space for Greenwood. Or if the number 5 stays here with Greenwood, then Wan-Bissaka can make an inside run. It's basically a way of creating multiple options, but it's very important that the fullbacks are up there to do this, because the issue with inverted wingers is that they have this tendency to cluster centrally, and that can make it quite congested. It can make it easy to mark and stop up the centre. So if we look first at Aaron Wan-Bissaka and how he's tending to play, what we know about Wan-Bissaka is that he started life as a winger, and he is a very good technical footballer. He's good at carrying the ball, he's actually quite good at crossing, but what everybody knows him for is his remarkable defensive attributes. So United have a great deal of solidity on this right-hand side, and that's even when Wan-Bissaka gets quite high up. If, for example, the opposition are able to make a pass here and break into this situation, we've got the number 11 here running onto that pass, Wan-Bissaka has this kind of ability to get alongside that man or even come around this side and stick out one of those kind of telescopic legs that he has and make a challenge. So what that means is that Wan-Bissaka can play quite high up on the pitch. And he can use that defensive ability and that covering with his pace, his athleticism, but also his really, really good one-on-one tackling to keep that side of the pitch stopped up. However, Manchester United don't really like to attack on this side. They are massively split towards the left-hand side, so about 45% of their attacks in the Premier League go down the left, compared with only 30% on the right. And that's a really, really big differential. Most Premier League sides are more even if they do have a preference. So Wan-Bissaka's average position is actually more around the halfway line. Now, average positions are, a little bit of a blunt tool because it doesn't really represent where a player covers across during the course of a whole game, but it is noticeable that on the left, the average position of the left fullback is considerably higher. So Wan-Bissaka comes up here, and one of the things that he's quite often looking to do is actually not make overlapping runs, but make underlapping ones. And one of the reasons for this is that if this player here, for example, Greenwood, is drifting inside, Wan-Bissaka's got a natural channel to run in here towards the opposition goal. And that should drag this central defender across, and that creates space in the centre, or it creates a shooting opportunity for Greenwood pushing in. He will also go around on the overlap, but that's something that maybe United, because they're not looking for as much width on the right-hand side, they're not looking for the same sorts of crossing opportunities, that happens a little bit less. The thing with Wan-Bissaka is that he is a very good footballer. He was also very expensive, and it's very unlikely that United are going to either drop him and put somebody else in that position, or perhaps more likely look to acquire somebody else in his stead, somebody who's a bit more attacking. One of the things that's interesting about English fullbacks at the moment is that the model seems to be the sort of Trent Alexander-Arnold. So that's a player who is maybe, occupying this sort of space quite a lot, looking to play these long passes in here or cross-field passes, brings a great degree of creativity, getting forwards on the overlap. And there's a lot of young, dynamic English fullbacks at the moment that are in this model. Wan-Bissaka isn't in this model. He's not as attacking, he's not as dynamic, and he is much more solid defensively. And what United are currently doing is they're basically playing to that strength a little bit. So they are asking him to get forwards somewhat, they are asking him to make underlapping runs, but by focusing the attacks more on the left-hand side, it plays to Wan-Bissaka's abilities to make sure that the right is really defensively secure, particularly on the counter, while also using his dynamism and his ability to get forwards as an occasional option. What this means is that the left-hand side is much more of a problem, and I think this is what you hear from United fans particularly, so we'll have a look at that now. On the left-hand side, the incumbent currently is Luke Shaw. He's played in 7 Premier League games this season. He's understudied by Brandon Williams, who's the Youth Academy product, and also Alex Telles, who was bought for just under £14 million in the summer from Porto. So United have got a number of options on the left-hand side, but those players bring different things. Now, when United build up from the back, one of the things that quite often happens is a midfielder drops towards the defensive line. That creates passing options and gives a degree of solidity and build-up. If we assume that Wan-Bissaka pushes up here on the right-hand side, one of the things that Luke Shaw does is he actually doesn't go that high up the pitch. He will tuck inside a little bit here and make a kind of central 2 with whichever central midfielder hasn't dropped back. What this does is it gives United the ability to pass out from the back with a reasonable degree of security. So, for example, this midfielder here will push up there, then Shaw will push the ball infield towards that midfielder and then move up a little bit. As United move up the pitch in this way, Shaw's kind of holding his position and providing a passing option, but also with the ability to tuck inside. That requires United to maintain their width further up the pitch with these inside forwards, and that's something that you see. So the ball may well come up to Rashford here, and then he's looking to cut inside. Unfortunately, because of Shaw's tendency to hold this central position and not be particularly aggressive, that denies United the opportunity to create an overlap here. This is one of the reasons why you see this clustering of players in the left half space where Fernandes is kind of dropping across to help out. It's partly because Shaw, in holding his position here, is not allowing for a natural outlet as an overlap on the left-hand side, which is what you'd see from a more aggressive fullback. Having said that, they will make runs along here. The left backs do get up and they quite often are ignored. You'll see these sorts of passing triangles created here where United are looking to keep it infield. And I think that's something that's worth saying about United's fullbacks, particularly on the left-hand side, is that when they do get forwards and make those sorts of overlapping runs, and we saw this with Alex Telles a lot against PSG last night, that's when we're recording this, the day afterwards, that he was making a lot of these runs and the ball just wasn't coming out to him. And that can probably be quite frustrating. So, there's an issue possibly there in terms of the way that United are using those fullbacks. If we clear this off and have a look instead at how Brandon Williams plays on this side, what you actually get is a player whose pass map is really remarkably similar to Luke Shaw's. The reason for this is probably less that he is positionally astute and secure and takes up these defensive positions. And also with Luke Shaw, potentially he's maybe held back a little bit by his injury issues and doesn't want to be quite as dynamic. Brandon Williams' big problem is that he's right-footed. So in playing on the left-hand side, automatically, if he receives the ball, he then naturally will want to turn back inside onto his right foot and look to play pretty safe passes in field. The reason for that is because as somebody who's not a natural left-footed player, if he's busting up the touchline here, he's going to have to turn inside in order to play a decent cross in here anyway. And so it makes a lot of sense for him to hold his position more, be a kind of outlet, an option to get the ball here, but then recycle it back in field. And that allows United to build progressively and slowly up from the back with a degree of solidity. Again, Brandon Williams will push up here, but more often than not, for reasons that make a lot more sense than perhaps the other left backs, he is ignored as an overlapping option. And that's because he would have to check back inside in order to deliver a really, really good cross. Williams probably makes more sense over here on the right-hand side as an understudy to Wan-Bissaka, particularly given that United now have 3 left-backs in their squad. It would perhaps be of value to give Williams a little bit more time playing at right-back, where his natural footedness makes a lot of sense as an understudy to Wan-Bissaka, someone who can allow him to get some rest. United's third option is new signing Telles. Now, Telles is, generally speaking, a more dynamic and attacking left-back. And so it's interesting to see that in build-up, he takes up the same sorts of positions. Again, he's not pushing up that high. He's staying relatively close to the touchline, but he's not pushing heavily forwards so that Maguire here has a passing option. Or if they push up the pitch here, then Fred's got a passing option. Telles was probably bought not least because of the high volume of assists that he generated at Porto. Now, a lot of those were from set pieces, and he's already on outswinging corner duties for Manchester United, which is interesting to see. United like to play outswinging corners from both sides. We've yet to see that really materialise in terms of goal production, but that's something that'll be interesting to look at as the season develops. But Telles is much more inclined to cross, so he's more likely to take up a position here and then try and hit early crosses or get forwards on the overlap and hit crosses from there. Now, what's interesting that you could note, for example, from the PSG game that was on last night, is that even as Telles gets into these positions more aggressively, and as a left-footed player is able to get more whip and bend on those crosses and not check back inside, he's still not being used on the overlap all that much. United's preference is not that pass there. It's much more likely to be that pass there, or possibly even that pass there. Now, why might these be deliberate decoy runs rather than the player just being ignored? Is because if United are clustering in this side and they're able to draw defenders over, then that can create space for someone like Greenwood to run in here, or perhaps for the ball to come back to Fernandes, who can either shoot or play a pass to Martial. If there's an overlapping run on this side, it's very likely that you're going to draw at least one defender across to that side, and that just basically spaces the defence a little more in Manchester United's favour because it creates a gap over here that they can then look to attack. And that's one of the reasons perhaps why Greenwood has been effective cutting in from that right-hand side and getting in shooting opportunities, because the left-back's decoy run and also the clustering of players in this sort of area is drawing the opposition defence over. So United's left-back options all have different strengths and weaknesses. Brandon Williams' major weakness is that he's right-footed, which means he doesn't work naturally on the left-hand side. Luke Shaw is probably the most reliable of those three currently. He's positionally astute. He's relatively quick. He knows what sort of positions to take up on the pitch in order to keep United defensively secure. But he lacks the attacking dynamism that Telles has, and Telles' ability to create opportunities from deep. Now, why is this a problem for United? Well, when United are at their best, it's when they're counter-attacking. So this front four of Rashford, Fernandes, Martial and Greenwood, or Cavani if Cavani's being used, are excellent when they're running into space, broken field play, played out from the back quickly, and they're using their pace and their technicality to run at defenders and create opportunities. If, however, the opposition are back like this, in a relatively well-structured low block, then it's harder for United to break teams down in this way. And that's one of the reasons why we often see this clustering of players here and then just a series of sort of passes that loop around in this kind of area without anything particularly happening. United are not great at breaking that sort of thing down. And that's why the fullbacks should come into play, because the fullbacks give an extra option out wide. They're able to deliver crosses, they're an out ball, or they're a decoy runner. And when you've got a 4-2-3-1 with inverted wingers, unless you're counter-attacking and you're able to use their pace and their ability to run at defences, then you have to have wide support from the fullbacks, otherwise you're not going to get the natural width. So while Manchester United do have a problem with their fullbacks, it's a particularly tricky problem to solve. Carl Anker, in a recent Athletic article, described Luke Shaw as a player who pulls up the talent floor of a team rather than pushing up its ceiling. And I think that's a really astute observation. These are above average footballers who maybe are not in the absolute upper echelon, but are still very, very good. And while you can understand fans' frustrations with some of the system issues and the fact that we're not seeing a team that are really that able to break down low blocks and play aggressively in the wide areas, if you're going to bring in fullbacks that can do that, you're looking at a very, very small number of players and players that come at a premium cost. And when Manchester United are having to make decisions about squad building and where to put their money, with the players they've currently got in their squad, fullbacks might not be a priority. Now, the signature of Alex Telles means that the coaching staff are aware that perhaps there needs to be a little bit more aggression, particularly on the left-hand side because of the way Wan-Bissaka plays on the right. And so as Alex Telles integrates more and more into the team, we will perhaps see some of these issues being addressed. But it is a tricky problem, and it's one that I'm glad I don't have to solve.